If you're looking to build a custom web application using a no-code tool, look no further than Bubble.io. Bubble is an app builder that makes it possible to build custom scalable applications without any code. That's right. You don't need to know how to write a single line of code. You might be asking, okay, well, there's lots of templated website builders out there. How is Bubble any different, and how far can I really get with it? That's what we're going to answer in this video. I'll walk you through all the different capabilities to consider so you understand what it can do for you, what's possible, things to keep in mind, and how to get started. So, is Bubble the right no-code app builder for you? Let's find out. It's Gabby over at Coaching No Code Apps. We help non-technical entrepreneurs build custom apps so they can launch their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses all without coding. There are many things to consider when looking for a no-code platform, so I'm going to break things down into these categories here so you have a comprehensive understanding of what Bubble offers. We'll start with capabilities to consider. The first thing to know is that Bubble is a full stack platform. You have control over the front end, the back end database, and all of the logic in between, all within your Bubble app. You do not have to cobble together different applications, different services to make everything function, which makes things really easy for you to focus on your development. Then we'll talk about the ownership of your application data and code and how Bubble handles that. Hosting of your application and security of your app, not just the data itself, but access to the back end, to the front end. You have a lot of control over user permissions. We'll look at extensibility. How connected can your app be to the outside world? We'll look at device compatibility to ensure that what you're building for your users is going to make sense on all different screen sizes. And finally, we'll touch on a few tips on how to get started if you've determined that this platform is right for you, or if you're just ready to get hands-on and explore. Let's start with capabilities. Remember, Bubble offers a full stack solution. So with traditional development, you'll typically be working with multiple languages to address the front-end design, the database and the communication with that database, and all of the custom logic, the custom code to make this application come to life. With Bubble, you have everything provided in one place. So you have a design canvas where you can create the front-end appearance and layouts, your pages, for your application, the visuals that your users are going to interact with. You have control over a custom database structure in the backend. Most Bubble applications are quite data-driven, and so having control over what tables you need, the fields within them, the relationships between them is really important for you to have control over, as well as all of the custom logic in between. So really making it come to life. When a user takes an action, what do we want the application to do from there? Okay, so it offers a full stack solution. I'm going to break each of these components down a little bit further so we understand, again, what is possible and also things to be mindful of if you're still shopping around. When it comes to design, you are in control of how the front end pages will look to your users. And this is managed through a drag and drop canvas. You'll have access to a list of visual elements that you can select and add to your page and configure everything about them. Their positioning on the page, their styling properties. There is nothing we are compromising on with the way that this design works. You can build beautiful applications that follow all web standards within this canvas. And because it's a drag and drop type of interface, it makes it easy for you to build very quickly without necessarily needing to have a design background. Bubble, of course, also supports full responsive behavior so that your designs can adapt to all screen sizes, everything from a mobile device all the way up to high-resolution desktop screens. There are a couple of things you want to be careful with when you're looking at Bubble as a new platform to build your application. If your app is going to have heavy graphics and animation, so think games that have a lot of motion graphics, Bubble is not the best suited for those types of applications. Bubble is really more meant for data-driven applications. Now, of course, you can design your apps so that you can manipulate the data in many ways and you can really create custom designs, but everything is more powered by the data itself. Okay, so if you're going to work with heavy motion graphics, this might not be the platform for you. This isn't to say that you can't have basic animations or you can't have images or multimedia. You can, of course, display images and play videos and even record that kind of content. But just be mindful that this is something that you want to look at a case-by-case basis to confirm that this platform is compatible with your requirements. Along the same lines, if you're thinking about building any kind of multimedia editor, this might not be the platform for you. So examples of multimedia editors would be image editors like Photoshop or audio editors like GarageBand or Pro Tools. video editors like Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere. Those sorts of things are most likely going to need to be custom coded. So again, just be careful with your requirements. You'll want to confirm that the platform will be able to support everything you need for that. Now, moving on to the data component of a Bubble application. Bubble offers a fully hosted database, and these are hosted on Amazon Web Servers that you can completely customize. You have control over the tables that you'll require, over the fields, the properties within those tables. So for example, a user record, right, a user profile that you want to create in your application needs to have a first name, a last name, a profile picture, a date of birth. It's completely up to you to custom define all of those things. And not only that, but also relationships between your records. So imagine a marketplace that you're working with. You're going to have payments and customers and listings, and all of those things need to be tied to each other so that it makes sense to the user, right? And you're able to document everything properly. And whenever users are searching for things, the appropriate elements come up for them. Now, when it comes to security of your data, Bubble is going to take care of you. There is a lot of built-in encryption and security that's happening for you that you don't need to worry about customizing. But on top of that, you're also going to have the ability to create custom privacy rules. This is a way for you to create more granular permissions around your custom data structure. Because at the end of the day, Bubble doesn't know exactly what you're building. And so you need to have some power over who can access what and who can do what with your data. Can certain users create and edit versus read only? Are they allowed to delete things, right? You have complete control over all of those. There's a lot of strategy involved to put those together properly, but all of this capability is absolutely there. Now, you also have an API that is created for you automatically to have external services get to your database. This is only if you need it, right? You can disable it. It doesn't have to be exposed. And again, lots of security rules that you can apply to this and different ways of granting that access to those external services. This is a really powerful capability that is available to you, especially for business applications, enterprise SaaS applications as well. User management is kind of assumed with most Bubble applications. Bubble assumes that most of your users are going to need to sign up and create an account with an email and a password. And so a lot of that is actually built into the platform, and you can, of course, customize it further. Now, the main thing to be mindful of when it comes to data are any industry regulations that you need to be compliant with. For example, Bubble is not HIPAA compliant, which is a US health law that governs how patient information is stored and transmitted. Bubble is, however, GDPR compliant. So, if you're in Europe and that's a requirement for your industry, then that is handled for you. But you do want to check with, the appropriate professional to make sure that everything is meeting those standards and meeting those regulations before you really move forward. Now, looking at the logic capability for Bubble applications, everything is managed through visual programming. This is how you are going to bring the application to life without having to write a single line of code. So visual programming really means choosing from a really big list of triggers and actions. Okay, if this, then that. If the user clicks a button, then modify the database. If the user loads the page, then send an email or show the user some visual element on the screen. You can string together multiple actions. You can combine these in any order that you want to create custom flows. It's this custom logic ability that allows you to design highly sophisticated applications, of course, very simple ones as well. It's really just up to your imagination. And it's this logic area here that is going to come with the highest learning curve, because it's completely up to you to put everything together. Again, Bubble doesn't know what you're building, but don't let this stop you. This is something that you are going to get better at as you get more hands-on, and you have very specific goals that you're trying to achieve. You will learn the best practices and the strategies for putting together your custom functionality. But it is important to remember that when you are building an application from scratch, from the ground up, even though there's no code, there's still logic involved. Everything needs to be strategic. And this is the area where that really shines. Now, another fantastic capability that I want to touch on is how extensible your Bubble application is with plugins and API connections. If you don't see a particular action or a particular visual element that you want your app to work with, check out the plugin marketplace. There are thousands of plugins, both free and paid, that you can install to your application to get extra capabilities. Okay, so things don't just stop at the visual elements and the actions and triggers that Bubble has initially. You can add more to your application. You can also create custom API connections to communicate with the outside world. This is especially helpful if you don't find any plugins that offer those connections automatically for you, or if you're working with a private API. Again, this is what allows you to really create a robust custom system. And of course, when it comes to a data-driven application, you are often going to be searching that database. You're going to be filtering through those results and manipulating the way that they're presented back to your user. This is a huge core component of Bubble applications. Most apps are quite data-driven, and so we need to have a powerful search capability, and that is, of course, there for you that you can customize in many ways as well. Now, when it comes to actually building out the application, the three components, design, data, and logic, are really the three things that you're going to jump back and forth between as you're putting everything together. But at the platform level, there are also some important capabilities to be aware of. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but your application does have the ability to expose not only a data API, but also a workflow API. What does that mean? Well, external services can trigger workflows in your app. Okay, external services can trigger workflows in your app. Think of an app-to-app notification system, such as a payment goes through with whatever payment gateway you like to use. Stripe, PayPal, can be any other ones that offer APIs. The moment a payment goes through, or a subscription is created, or a credit card fails, your application can be notified and trigger a sequence of actions so that things can be automated. People can be notified. You can update the database. You can send emails from there. So by exposing capabilities in your application, your custom data, your custom workflows, you've really opened yourself up to creating a powerful tool. Now, collaboration is also something that's available if you plan on working with a team. Maybe you're working on more logic while a partner is working on more of the front-end design. Bubble has systems to enable collaboration where you can sync what you're all working on. You can have multiple people on it. There's a lot of tools around that to make it easy to work within a team. Now, any good application builder is going to offer version control capabilities, backups, so that if you ever want to revert back to a previous version, both in the construction of the app, but also your database, and extensive logging of activity in your application. This is really important for you to, develop as a smart and informed developer, right? You need to understand where things are and how things are functioning in your application in order for you to troubleshoot if anything comes up, in order for you to make improvements. Okay, so this is back-end capability so that you have full managerial control over the application. And of course, you can connect your app to a custom domain. And to be honest, if you can do it with a website, you can do it with Bubble and more. Now, a couple of general platform things to be aware of, and these are some big ones here that could make or break whether this platform is right for you. But the first is Bubble does not allow you to export the code to use on a different application building system. Okay, in other words, Bubble apps only work on Bubble. And similarly, you can't import application code to then have it magically work within the Bubble system. It doesn't work that way, right? So when you begin an application on Bubble, it's going to live on Bubble. Now, to be clear, you can export your data. Your data is always yours. I'm going to touch on this a little bit more in a moment, but you will always be able to get your data out of the application if you need. It's the architecture of the application, the pages, the database structure, the logic, that is all going to be housed for you on Bubble. And finally, Bubble is a platform that is meant to build web applications, which means you need to access your app through a browser and you need to have internet connection. There is no offline support. Okay, we'll touch on a couple more details around mobile capability in a moment. Now let's touch on that point again about who owns what with a Bubble application. So the short answer is you own your app's data and design. You cannot export your application's code to an external system. You can technically download a raw file as a way of having a backup of your app's architecture solely to be able to re-import it back into a Bubble app, not to re-import anywhere else, or to at least have the raw structure of your application if you decided you wanted to rebuild on a different system, okay? You also have the ability to export your app's data to CSV or via API. So you can, like I said, you have the ability to expose your database entries, the records, via API so that external services can pull that data and then send it to other places if you want. But at the end of the day, you own your application and the design. Now let's take a look at your app's hosting and security. If this is the first time you're thinking about building a website or any kind of web application, this part might seem a little intimidating because with traditional code, it's up to you to configure your servers and all the settings around that and who is going to control the servers? Who are you paying to manage that? What kind of plan do you need to be on? How much server do you need? Some of this can really feel abstract. So the great thing about the Bubble platform is that all of the hosting is done for you and a lot of the standard security is already implemented for you. So that way you don't have to even think about it. The first thing to know is that Bubble is built on Amazon Web Services, which is practically a global standard when it comes to internet hosting. Some of the internet's most popular websites are all hosted on AWS. And there's a lot of built-in security that comes from that alone. Now, most of the Bubble applications on the main infrastructure is going to be hosted on US-based servers. If you are looking to have your app hosted on another server outside of the US, you'll want to speak with Bubble about getting that set up. You'll have to go through one of their dedicated plans for it, but it is a possibility. Again, Bubble hosts your app for you because they're in charge of all the configuration around AWS. So there's honestly nothing that you need to do. You're just going to sign up for a new account. You'll create a new application or multiple applications if you want under that account, and all of the hosting is done for you. Now, this next point is a little bit more technical, but data is encrypted at rest, which basically just means that the database that contains all of your data is already protected for you. And you have to have specific authorization to access that data. But you also have granular control over who can access what in your database. If it's a logged out person versus a logged in person, or if it's someone that you've created custom definitions for, let's say, again, you're building a marketplace and you have buyers and sellers. So you have to identify who a buyer is compared to who a seller is. And depending on who they are, they can access certain records in the database, and not just records as a whole, but also field by field. You can get that granular. And you can also dictate whether someone should be able to see the data and or edit the data or delete it, right? Every level of security you will be able to configure here. But the baseline encryption that needs to happen at the server levels are going to be happening for you. Now, I touched on this before, but Bubble is incredibly extensible, which means that you can install plugins from the marketplace where there are thousands of plugins created by Bubble users themselves, and of course, a handful by Bubble themselves. But this gives you a whole new world to add to your application, depending on what it is you're doing. There are element plugins, there are workflow plugins, there's database plugins. Some of these things are more coded. And so instead of you having to find a developer to code a custom interaction, contributors of the marketplace have done these things for you and have created plugins to make it really easy for you to install into your app and just use out of the box. In addition to plugins, you can also create your own custom connections to APIs. So that allows you to communicate with other services on the web. Now, there might be plugins available for APIs, or you can create your own custom connections. You also have the ability to create private plugins just for your own app that involve custom code. So you do have the ability to add custom code to your app if needed. And as you can see here, there's actually a few different tools that you can work with if you're looking to connect to the outside world. So the API connector is one of the most popular ones. If you have a SQL database that you're coming into this with, there is a SQL database connector where you can make queries to that database. You also have a Bubble app connector tool, which allows you to have multiple Bubble apps communicate with each other. So one application can pull from another app's database, or they can trigger workflows within one another. At the end of the day, these are just API calls, but Bubble does have a tool to make that really easy for you to get set up almost out of the box. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is device compatibility. It is pretty much expected that web applications need to look great and work fantastic on all devices, from your mobile devices all the way up to tablets and laptops and desktops to high resolution screens. You want to make sure that everything looks good here. And so to support that, Bubble has a very powerful responsive engine that you can work with to ensure that your layouts all adapt to these different screen sizes properly. So that responsive engine is going to be out of the box behavior that everybody gets no matter what. You'll be able to immediately start working with your application and previewing it through your browser on any device size. When it comes to submitting your application to the app stores, right, the Apple iOS store or the Google Play Store, that is a very different capability, okay? You have to build out your web app regardless of whether you want to put your application in the app stores. Now, if you want to do that, you'll have to go through a third-party process known as wrapping. This simply converts the application's format into something that's compatible for those stores. But at the end of the day, even if the users download your app from the stores, they still need to have an internet connection, right? This is at best a hybrid. It's not a true native application. Native apps are built from scratch with code for the specific platforms, like an iOS app versus an Android-based app, okay? So you're wrapping the application is just a way to allow users to find you on the app stores, but it's still going to behave very much like the app that you experience in the browsers. An alternative is converting your application to progressive web apps, or a PWA. This is a more lightweight alternative that still gives you some native-like experiences and behaviors. Again, you still need an internet connection. You go through a third party to do this kind of conversion as well. Technically, you can do it yourself, but there's some code involved. And so I do recommend you go through a third party to help you with that. But it can be more cost effective. And oftentimes the capabilities that a progressive web app can add to your app may be all you need for specific mobile behaviors, such as getting access to your device's contacts or more targeted push notifications. It really just depends on what you're working with. So if this platform sounds like it's right for the app that you want to build, I encourage you to create a new application for free and explore the interface. Get hands-on with it. One of the best tips that I can give you for starting to learn how to work with the platform is to define clear and simple goals. That's going to keep you really focused and actually learning with context. Now, remember, you do have to get into a programmer's mindset. Just because there's no code, it doesn't necessarily mean every aspect of building an app from scratch, without code is going to be easy. There are still strategies involved, especially if you're going to build more comprehensive logic. There's still best practices to follow. And a lot of these things are going to come through trial and error. One thing that I can tell you is that everything feeds off of each other, right? Those three different pillars that we talked about at the beginning, the database, the design, and the logical workflows, they all work with each other, and they can often have a ripple effect on each other whenever you make an adjustment. So the way that we like to approach new features in new applications is starting with the database, try to define that data structure first as much as possible, then focus on displaying that data in, an appropriate design and keep it simple. And then you can connect the communication between the two through workflows. And you just kind of move through that cycle from there. You'll be going back and forth between these three sections, but if you can generally go in that order, that's going to make things easier for you to move through efficiently and to catch things early, wherever possible. Now, if this is something that you are ready to commit to, and you want to make sure that you're building your application properly from the beginning, so that it can scale well, you don't run into performance issues later on, you don't necessarily end up having to spend so much trial and error time figuring every single thing out. There's a lot of functionality that has to come together in the right order at the right time. There's best practices and so on. Then I encourage you to sign up for our free training at coachingnocodeapps.com. We've got a lot of material in there that we've put together after years of experience working with literally hundreds of applications in many different industries. So we've kind of seen it all. So hopefully there's something that you can find in there to help you move through your development more efficiently. And thank you for watching.